5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
You're listening to Relentless. This is the show for high performers who are driven and committed to being at their best. Nick Peterson and Jonathan Montgomery, co-founders of Relentless Dietetics, are your hosts.
Welcome to the Relentless Podcast. I'm Nick Peterson, hanging out again today with Jonathan Montgomery.
What is up?
And the Dr. Trevor Cashy.
Hello.
Love it. As per usual, we're here to discuss just getting a little bit better every day. This podcast was recorded in a very specific order in order to deliver the maximum amount of clarity, value, effectiveness, and give you control and help give you the tools for a little bit of thinking at a higher level. And the next level thinking, the next thing you really want to ask yourselves is, are you controlling the important stuff that you can control? Or are you sitting back saying, oh my gosh, everything just happens to me? We give a lot of good advice. Dr. Cashy gives phenomenal advice. Jonathan gives instruction all day. And we get a lot of, but Nick, but Jonathan, excuse number one, excuse number two, my parents this, my parents that. I was born in this country, but I have an orange tree instead of an apple tree in my backyard. My dog ate my homework, and I know Jonathan's favorite, but I don't have your genetics.
I'm honestly not really sure what's worse. The dog ate my homework or sitting on your couch in your mom's basement complaining about your crappy genetics. After the Men's Health article on my process with Dr. K came out, I got applauded for my amazing genetics too, as well as my Photoshop skills. The funny thing is I was just about good enough at Photoshop to become a fireman. And even funnier still is the concept of my great genetics. Have you guys ever seen a picture of my dad, all 5'8" and 127 pounds of him? Definitely true. I am absolutely descendant from the lineage of legendary physical specimens. No doubt about it. Best genetics ever.
You're not lying. I've seen your high school photo. You are a specimen.
Yeah, I graduated high school at a whopping 150 pounds. I definitely was not the most physically imposing member of my graduating class. Part of that was because I was vegan. But the cool thing was I was the only kid with a 5-colored mohawk. So I guess that was kind of neat. But honestly, who was impressive in high school to me was Dr. K. T, you actually do come from a bit of an impressive lineage. Tell us a little bit about the Cashy clan and how you came to start realizing some of your potential. I mean, did it happen overnight for you, or did you have to put some work into it?
I suppose that depends on the window you're looking through. I was pretty much like 6 foot tall with a full beard and 220 pounds at like age 12.
Wow.
And I have just stayed there. Like I haven't really changed much at all. I mean, I look better or worse at 220 or 230, but I've pretty much been the same weight and height my entire life. And as far as lineages are concerned, I'm like probably fourth generation in terms of like my great grandfather was a professional wrestler, and his name this isn't like collegiate wrestling or freestyle or Greco-Roman. He was in TV wrestling like before WWE existed. He was called King Kong Cashy.
Wow.
And yeah, he's pretty crazy. And he was like 6'3" and 230 pounds, some obnoxious sized human for 1930. He got my grandfather into it, and he was Golden Boy, and they were a tag team to some degree, sometimes yes, sometimes no. And then my father was also into wrestling and judo after that. But basically, like my ancestors started out angry and brown because I'm of Middle Eastern descent, and then each generation I got lighter and lighter and hairier. Very interesting combination. So I'm just a combination of, angry people and hairy people. And now I'm just a very white and hairy with long arms and not quite as tall. So, it's Lamarckian genetics are real for sure.
I just love how you peaked in middle school. I mean, that's an impressive feat. You're kind of an early starter on a lot of stuff. You kind of just get it done, get it out of the way.
Definitely. So you know how like you get a cool birthday present, right? Typically when you have a birthday, you know, everybody quotes, you get little things from different people, aunt, uncle, grandma, whatever, but you always get like one awesome gift that's like, this one stands above all the other ones. I remember when I was 10, like I got like a super fancy electric razor. I was like, I really want a PlayStation, you know, and I got like a Norelco, you know, gas-powered turbocharged electric razor, which is really awesome and expensive, but like I had no idea how to appreciate that as much as I do now. Yeah. Now I'm like, oh, a vacuum, thanks. But that doesn't really happen when you're 10.
So genetic variability does exist. Because I wasn't shaving at 10. I tell you, I didn't graduate at 2:30 either. So we're seeing there are some differences. I had the milk with extra
hormones in it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I started shaving like 6 months ago. So that's just, you know, you're dealt your hand. I've also seen, Trevor, I've seen the way you look change tremendously based on what you're controlling and what you're not. You've been 220. But I've seen you look like you just came out of a concentration camp, because you pretty much did. And I've seen you shredded out of your mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's pretty cool just to see the level of control still gives you that. You still have all that variability and you still have all that control.
Yes, it's crazy. The difference is at the same weights and what you can accomplish, you know, ignoring certain things, I guess, is probably the best phrase.
The whole thing that we want to highlight here is controlling what you can't control and ignoring the rest. Because you probably can't be anything you want to be, but you can be a lot more than you give yourself credit for. And there's no way to really forecast what is possible. You know, your potential is unknown and it's unknowable without years and years of hard work and not succumbing to the stress of stressing about the stuff you cannot control. And I think that comes from working, failing, reflecting on that failure by controlling what you can control, correcting what you can correct, and kind of seeing where that takes you.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. The reality is you are limited in life by many factors. Not everyone can be everything they want to be when they grow up. That's life. You know, it kind of sucks, but you got to just move on. We've talked about my outstanding genetics at 5'11", with a vertical leap on par with that of a sloth, and just about the same hand-eye coordination. At some point, I just had to face it. I had to give up my dreams and aspirations of playing in the NBA. It just wasn't working out for me. But I didn't let what I couldn't be stop me from focusing on the other facets of life that I could excel at. You know, just not everyone's destined to be a magical unicorn or a King Kong Kashi, you know, and not everyone's life is going to be always full of sunshine and rainbows. But no matter what your lot in life is or the hand you feel you've been dealt, you can always make some improvements and you can always better your situation by focusing on the things you can accomplish and not the things you can't.
Yeah, that's something we talk about a lot too, which we'll probably get into in subsequent episodes, the whole concept of via negativa, and Trevor just touched on a little bit, ignoring the stuff that you need to ignore. I think way too many people are not controlling the things they can, and they're not taking the steps that they can take because they're so obsessed with the stuff they have no control over. And in that fixed mindset, they use those things to identify, right? They identify themselves with this, like, Jonathan, if you said, well, I want to play basketball, but I'm 5'11", I suck as a human. You're not gonna try anything because you've identified with this. I suck. There's no point in measuring things. There's no point in managing things. There's no point in even exercising because I'll never be in the NBA.
Yeah, you know, Mark Devine has said, do not participate in your own pity party. And honestly, for me, that pretty much nails it. You can make changes. You may not be the best, but you can be the best version of you that you can possibly be. Let's face it, not everyone is destined to be the GOAT. There's only one of those, you know, the Highlander. There can be only one. But you can elevate your status. You can achieve lofty goals relatively, and you can consistently and measurably improve. And, you know, quite frankly, that beats the alternative of stumbling through your life, just accepting what's been given to you any day that, of the week, and just complaining about all the things that aren't going your way. The question for me is, great, this sucks. What are you going to do about it moving forward? How are you going to fix it?
If you're ready to get the body you desire without depriving yourself of the foods you enjoy, download your free diet playbook now at www.relentlesspodcast.com.
Yeah, I think that's the ultimate growth mindset. And again, like Trevor said, ignore the stuff you can't control and looking at failure and saying, what can I do? What can I do to get better? Who can teach me this better? Why am I failing at this, instead of, oh, I must have bad genetics, which is kind of where I was when I met you guys. Kind of reached out to Trevor and said, hey, look, I got to find somebody believable, because if this doesn't work, I'm going to accept that I have bad genetics. Fortunately, you guys showed me how to control what I could control. And that's really a huge turning point in all areas of my life.
I think it's worth also mentioning that there's a difference between playing your strengths and trying to force a square peg in a round hole, like Jonathan mentioned. And I think it's worth figuring out, what are you good at, or what do you have a propensity for? Because people do have propensities for things. And then what do you like within the realm of things that you can do? And it's more of like Nick said, figuring out what you can do versus what you can't. And what you had a dream about, or what you saw on TV, or whatever, a little bit of objectification, I guess, if that's the right word, needs to happen, where there needs to be some sort of assessment, formal or not. This is the stuff that I'm good at, or can be good at. Of these things, where do I want to go? And other than that, you have to have some sort of, talk with yourself for managing your expectations, where if you don't have a propensity for something, then it's okay to do it, so long as you have the conversation that no matter how much you play basketball, it's not going to make you 6'8".
I think, Trevor, you really nailed something there. When it comes to getting into specific areas of improvement, maybe you want to get better at something, maybe you're looking for support or guidance. For me, it all comes down to, what are you trying to address? How are you defining your areas of strengths and weaknesses? And how are you determining this focus for improvement? You just nailed it. How are you assessing what you're doing, and what is the net impact of it towards your goals? Just by simply taking those steps to ask yourself those hard questions. What am I good at? What do I enjoy within that subset? How can I improve and maximize this potential? I think is a massive step towards, controlling your outcomes and being the best you can be.
Yeah. And I talk to a lot of people, because I do a lot of the calls on the front end, and realize that people have no control of anything. But they're craving it, right? So especially with food, nutrition, they don't have somebody believable that is helping them understand what they need to control, how to measure it, how to manage it, all the things we've talked about in the past, on past episodes. But it's also the place where you probably have way more control and you have way more room to improve than you think possible, because your parents had diabetes and you've always been heavy and blah, 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 whatever it may be. And so, Jonathan, Trevor, either one, really explain how you determine where they're at and how you give people control and get them where they need to be.
With food, it's interesting the way we look at things. We simply start by seeing where you're at. We start by asking questions. What you're doing right now is what brought you to the position you're wanting to make changes from. And it's keeping you there, and it's sustaining you, which is a good thing. Once we know where you're at, then we can kind of start making adjustments to get you where you want to be. Starting with the things that are within your reach and that you are capable of executing, while continuing to shape your choices over time to be more in line with your goals, is kind of the approach we take. And it kind of falls back on everything we talked about. What are you good at right now? How can we work on making you better? What you should do doesn't matter, but what you can do consistently does. these are the areas we want you to control and focus on. And these are the things you can have a direct impact over. Maybe you can't control your genetics. Maybe you can't control predisposition to medical conditions, but your intake, your hydration status, the balance and composition of your meals, your activity, your environment, your sleep, your stressors, all of these things you can exert your influence on, and they can be used to create a stable platform from which you to operate and make measured and controlled changes. Controlling the things that you can control, and the list is exhaustive, you're going to tend to insulate and protect yourself from the factors out of your control to a degree. And this is going to allow you to see, again, what is and isn't contributing to your success over time, and allow for further adjustments to keep making improvements. This process seems to work a whole lot better than simply lamenting over all the things that are out of your control. And feeling you have everything going against you while sitting around and doing nothing to improve the things that you can. Again, control what you can control, and you'll probably be surprised by the outcome.
Yeah, I think the level of stress people put into the things that cannot be controlled are better utilized. Like you said, Jonathan, trying to figure out what can be controlled. And if all those things are controlled, then you can go spend time with your family, walk your dog, do other stuff.
Can you ask the question again? Jonathan went off, and then I was entranced, and then I lost my own train of thought.
For everyone wondering on this podcast why I went off so hard, I am extremely caffeinated, so I apologize.
Jonathan's wife makes the most tremendous. I'm looking forward to going to Florida in December just to get absolutely spun out on Ann's wife or Ann's coffee. Anne might have a wife there too. I don't know.
If there's anything she controls, it's the caffeine. She controls it pretty well.
This podcast is brought to you by Ann's Mega Coffee. Trevor, it was what kind of things can people control when it comes, especially to food or fitness related stuff, that they just have no idea about or they're just not doing?
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting question, because there are definitely probably a couple dozen factors that I could list off the top of my head. And the interesting thing is that they're all interrelated, right? And they're all dynamic. So these things are constantly changing, and you do have to change to meet them. But eventually it all kind of forms together into two different things that also interrelate. And these is basically your environment and your behavior. And these are the two things that you do have direct control over. Maybe not perfect all the time, but these are two big umbrellas that have the greatest impact on what direction you head. And, things like your age, insulin sensitivity, your gut microbes, the economic state of the country you're in, the changing food supply. I mean, there's a bunch of things that do have a legitimate impact, but really it's a matter of what is your macro environment versus your micro environment and how you operate within those two places. And those are if you can control that, then these are things that really the formula is pretty much the same. And the difference is how you respond to it. But that is what you don't have control over. All you can do is maximize what you can, and the rest will really end up taking care of itself so long as you have proper direction.
Environment and behavior. Until you've controlled the things you can control, once you've identified the important things and the things you can control within those important things, you really have no business complaining about the stuff you cannot control. You cannot control the fact that your parents, your grandparents were overweight, sick, unhealthy, but you can count your calories. You may not be able to control a family history of type 2 diabetes, but we've pointed out in the seminar, Trevor, one time, that you can take a measurement.
Yeah, and from what I have seen is that it's not necessarily that diabetes runs in your family. It's that nobody runs in your family.
It's so sad, but true. I mean, in all honesty, it's maybe you were dealt a crappy hand, and maybe you're dealt a crappy family, and everybody has been shoving bonbons and ho-hos down your throat your whole life. But today's a new day. You can make that commitment to yourself. You can control it. You can control, as Nick pointed out, you can start counting your calories. And as Trevor pointed out, you can be the first runner in your family, and you can do some different stuff to kind of affect the outcome of the hand you've been dealt.
Yeah, and that's not a negative. That's a positive.
Absolutely.
You don't have to go the route that everybody else did. If you're the only person to do something, that's not necessarily bad. And there's no need to let the outcome of other people in your family or not have an impact on the decisions you make when it comes to your health. It is in your control more than you think, period.
I think this is where coaching is super important. They can help you identify what it is that you need to control, and they can help keep you consistent and accountable for a long time, and then step back and see what's left. And you'll be surprised at how many things get resolved by just focusing and controlling the right things. You've been listening to the Relentless Podcast. Now, if you've enjoyed this episode and you want to keep getting a little bit better every day, do us a favor, head over to iTunes, subscribe, leave us an honest review, and be sure not to miss the next one.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.